The first week of the testimony in the sex trafficking trial against Sean Combs ended with a former member of one of Combs' musical groups on the witness stand. Dawn Richard says that she saw Combs attack Cassie Ventura in 2009. Richard is suing Combs in federal court, accusing him of sexual assault and battery. She'll be back on the witness stand on Monday. Now, the star witness of the week, though, was Cassie Ventura, Combs' former girlfriend. Her civil suit against Combs led to this trial in part, and the singer and actress recounted how she met Combs when she was a teenager, worked with him under contract at his record label, and eventually became his girlfriend. She answered questions about how the alleged abuse began, how it led to the so-called freak-offs. She said that she was coerced into participating in and coordinating. Her week on the stand ended with Combs' defense lawyers interrogating Ventura about the incident seen on surveillance video of Combs attacking Ventura in a hallway at a hotel. And while under cross-examination, she discussed her inpatient treatment for mental health problems and taking medication for opiate addiction. With us now, trial attorney, legal analyst, and crisis manager Monique Presley. She's also the host of The Daily Show, Make It Make Sense with Monique Presley. Thank you for being with me. So let's start with the defense here, because their lift this week was to convince the jury that Cassie Ventura was willingly engaging in these freak-offs and this activity, that she was not forced, she was not coerced. It's up to the jury to determine that. But how much progress do you think they made on that path?
I think that the defense did what they were supposed to do this week, because though you call it a lift, obviously where the burden is concerned, the burden is on the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard in the law. And the defense doesn't have to prove anything right now. Sometimes it looks like burden shifting and it looks like there's a case that has to be made on the other side, but that's not true. So I think because we heard a significant amount of testimony from Ms. Ventura, that maybe the jury could take either way. The defense did not have as hard of a job this week as I thought they would.
Yeah. And you're right to point out that the onus is on the prosecutors. The defense can simply stand up and have nothing to say. It's totally up to the prosecutor. So let's move to that side of the courtroom. I had a judge on earlier this morning who said that she doesn't see a racketeering conviction. I reminded her we're a week into an 8-week trial. So there's more to come. But what do you see as it relates to that specific charge and what we heard from the Ventura testimony and just the earliest part of Dawn Richard's testimony?
Right. And I've got to agree with that judge. What I said, I spoke with your dear colleague, Laura, earlier in the week, and I said, I don't see it yet. That doesn't mean we won't see it, but because Ms. Ventura has been promoted as the star witness, I don't think it's established there. And here's why. I think that there's a good bit of time being spent on domestic abuse. And while the domestic abuse is hideous, it is horrible, there's no justifying it, he's not charged with it, Victor. So they're using it in order to show that there was this environment of coercion, but there's several things that Ms. Ventura said that lean the other way. So whether it was the initial questioning where she said the reason why she started doing the freak-offs was because she loved him, whether it was her testimony that she started to view it really was like a job, that she was the person who was making the arrangements. She was the person who was contacting the travel agent for the escorts. She was the person who was selecting the different escorts based on certain parameters. None of that testimony necessarily goes to what the prosecution is hoping to prove. But here's the other thing I'll point out. The jury may be looking at Ms. Ventura as a co-conspirator, as a willing participant in a criminal enterprise. That doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't a criminal enterprise. It just means to me that the prosecution is going a long way to try to prove that Ms. Ventura was forced into an action that I think they can get their proof on where Mr. Combs is concerned, whether Ms. Ventura was involved by force or whether she was involved by choice. It would still be a crime if they can use the rest of the time they have in this trial to show that the racketeering and the sex trafficking actually existed.
Interesting. So Dawn Richard, she faced a few questions on Friday. She'll be back on the stand on Monday. The difference, one of the differences here is that Cassie Ventura's civil case against Combs and his companies, that's been settled. Richard's civil lawsuit is still pending. Does that impact how these attorneys approach her if they try to color this as some way of I guess, supporting her civil case? How does that difference impact the approach to these witnesses?
I think that can be argued either way. For instance, where the fact that Ms. Ventura's case, her civil case is already settled and the money's already been received, to me, that doesn't count against her. Perhaps it counts to her credibility because she chose to participate in the criminal trial anyway. However, where Ms. Richard is concerned, the fact that she is participating when, frankly, a criminal conviction may harm her ability to recover. It may harm Mr. Combs' ability to have the finances, the funding to be able to pay any recovery. So there are risks either way. I just think that as people are watching, they need to remember trials involve humans, and humans are messy. So you don't have any purity tests in terms of your witness is on the stand and has never done anything wrong, or your defendant is on the stand and has never done anything right. There's a lot going on both sides, and it really is up to the jury to ferret that out as long as they're given the right facts and the proper instructions from the judge about the law.
Monique Presley helping us understand it. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Joining me now is CNN senior legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Ellie Honig. Okay, Ellie, before it began, you wrote and said it's overwhelmingly likely to end in a conviction, but it is not a cakewalk. Do you want to take any of that back now that we're into the trial?
No, I'm going to stick with that exactly, Michael. So I think the first part of that is overwhelmingly likely to result in conviction because we saw the evidence this week. I think Cassie Ventura was an extremely effective witness for the prosecution. I think she came across as credible and sympathetic and realistic in the way she described what happened to her. I think that video that we've been showing is incredibly compelling and visceral. But here's why it's not a cakewalk. The prosecutor's job here is not to prove that Sean Combs was a bad guy, a terrible guy. In fact, the defense got up and said he is a bad guy. He did commit domestic violence. But the charges here, the charges are the thing. This is not a state prosecution. This is not a domestic violence prosecution. This is a federal prosecution for racketeering, forcible sex trafficking, and then interstate prostitution. And I think as bad and damning as the evidence is, it's going to be tough for prosecutors, I think, to get it to meet the definition of racketeering and forcible sex trafficking.
Okay, and one final point, correct me if I'm wrong, but consent does not provide Diddy a defense here, but to the extent that they're seeking to show that she was a willing participant, it seems like they're just trying to make the whole situation and everybody involved part of some ugly enterprise and turn the jury off. Do I have it right?
Well, so two things. So on the sex trafficking charges, there's two variations of them. The more serious variation is by force, threats, or coercion. So if she consented, that would negate that. There's a less serious variation that's just interstate prostitution that carries a much lower penalty. To the larger point, the first count in this case is a racketeering conspiracy. I used to charge this all the time. Traditionally, that charge is used for mob families, for drug trafficking organizations. You can see it applied in other ways, but they need to show that Sean Combs was at the head of an organization, an organized group that committed multiple interconnected crimes for a common purpose. And I don't think Cassie Ventura's testimony on its own gets prosecutors there, but this is what I'm looking for in the coming weeks. I think they're going to build this out. I think they're going to show that this was not just a troubled domestic relationship, but prosecutors are going to try to show that this was a larger pattern of organized activity. I think it's going to be tough. I think they're going to have a hard time making out that racketeering charge, but I do think they've introduced some powerful evidence that can set them on their way towards it.
I'm going to put a social media up and we'll explore it together, but I want to say something. Criminal enterprise, he's the only one at the table. Enterprise with whom?
Yeah. Look, it's a good point. Technically, you can have a racketeering enterprise of one. It is not ideal. I mean, when I charge federal racketeering cases, the fewest defendants I ever had was maybe 5 or 6. I had 25 defendant cases, and I think count on the defense trying to exploit that. They're going to say, folks, they're trying to build this up into more than it is. It was a troubled domestic
they've overcharged
relationship, and they're trying to make him a RICO of one. Yeah.
Okay, real quick. Here's that social media. I'll read it out loud. Listening to all the reporting so far on this trial, and I'm no lawyer, but I don't hear the RICO charges coming out, at least so far. That's pretty much what you were just saying. I certainly see that Combs is a bad guy who treats women like objects and is probably misogynistic. Lots of adjectives we could use. But where's the RICO? Give me just 20 seconds on that, Ellie.
I agree. If the verdict had to be rendered today on RICO, he's not guilty. However, stay tuned, because this is the task now for prosecutors. They have to call other witnesses. They have to establish there was some element of organization here. That's the challenge.
Ellie, excellent as always. Thank you so much.